Hi, it's John Kelly. In this module, we are going to discuss presentation skills. And this isn't actually about an accounting and auditing topic, but if we are going to do a presentation about such a topic, we'd like to be efficient and effective. So these are some tips on how we might make a presentation efficiently and effectively. 4 steps, I think, to do a presentation. First, plan and develop the presentation. Second, prepare, learn the subject. Third, rehearse. And 4, present. And there will be feedback between all those sections. Planning and developing will encompass preparation, and planning and developing and rehearsing will feed back into how you think your presentation is going to be. And then some tips at the end on how to do presentations. So first, plan and develop. You will want to come up with your presentation order. You want to lay out on slides what you're going to say. I tend to start to do that on a piece of paper with a pencil, but reasonably quickly I move on to doing it in PowerPoint. Once I kind of have a general idea of what I want the presentation to look like, I move on to PowerPoint. And you can, of course, change things around, move slides around, copy, paste very quickly. You will then want to prepare your material, the slides, and any participant handouts. If you are using a presentation that someone else has prepared, you will have to spend some time fixing their material to make it work for you. And one tip right at the very beginning, you want to reference all participant exercises on a slide. For instance, you will have a slide saying, see page 19 of your binder for exercise number 1. And that is more to cue you than the participants. The participants will be moving their way through their participant binder. You're up at the front of the room with a bunch of overheads. And if all you have is the overheads, they'll know it's time for an exercise, but you'll go blowing right by. So always reference all participant exercises on the slide. And then your slides or your cue cards. And the slides are to some extent cue cards. You're going to know your material. You're going to know what you want to say. So when the slide comes up, you will be able to talk to it. If you're not using PowerPoint, if you've got a large group, for instance, literally, it could be recipe cards. Your cue cards would be cue cards, and you would have a deck of recipe cards in front of you, perhaps laid out on the podium in front of you, and you would make your presentation by following through that. Another way you can produce cue cards for yourself if you're presenting is you can print out the slides 2x2 or 4x4 on a page, and you're not even actually using PowerPoint in your presentation, but you used PowerPoint to prepare your lecture notes. The problem with a written speech, unless you are very good and practiced at delivering a written speech, it will sound stilted. It will sound like you are reading a speech. The other thing, a teleprompter would be cool, but using a teleprompter is even another thing that's quite a skill that you would have to learn. So you're having your own mini teleprompter, you're having recipe cards or slides to tell you what you're going to do. The larger the group, in a very, very large group where overhead slides just would be, well, I guess in a very large group you might have a very, very large screen, so you could do it. But in a large group, if you're speaking to a bunch of people, maybe the only presentation you have is your cue cards. The other thing you might do now, sometimes you will have a written speech or written notes. If you've printed out overheads 4x4, you will have them on the podium in front of them. If you flip the page over, you will whack the microphone and you get a thump on the microphone. You will notice that presenters, even people that are using a teleprompter, will have their speech in front of them. They occasionally look down at it for a dramatic pause, but what they do is they push the page side to side. Now, if you're actually presenting from that, that's a really good thing, because on the left-hand side is what you're talking, and the right-hand side is what you're about to talk about, and you move the page across after you've come to it. So you're never turning the page in the middle looking for the next thing you're going to say. The larger the group, probably the fewer slides you want. The other thing in a large group, and they tend to like to turn the lights down and leave the lights bright on the presenter, that tends to leave the participants feeling that they're not really involved in the presentation, and they'll sometimes fall asleep. So my preference is that the lights are up. PowerPoint and overhead projectors are now bright enough that you don't have to turn the lights in the room off. I like to leave the room lights up so that everybody feels like they're involved in the presentation. Flipcharts, old-fashioned, low-tech. It can be good. Occasionally you can use it. I once used it in a group of 500 where I had a 30-minute presentation divided into basically 3 10-minute segments. Each section had a different topic. I had 3 words, who, what, where, written on an overhead in great big huge letters, and I used that to guide my presentation. I didn't actually ever write anything during the presentation. Certainly they're better in a smaller group. You don't have to have a power cord. You don't trip over a cord. They're casual and portable. Some hints on using flip charts. Lefties stand to the right of the chart, righties to the left, and that's so that you don't stand in front of the chart while you're writing on it. Print and print in capitals. Be careful of colors. They will give you a whole rainbow of colors. Almost all of them, if you use them, will be invisible to the participants. Yellow in particular. If you write in yellow, the people at the back of the room won't be able to see it. So stick to black or brown. If you are making a bunch of points on overhead on flip charts, you can rip the page off and stick it onto the wall of the presentation room with masking tape. One of the other tricks you can do if you are, say you're making a presentation and you're asking people, what do you think our new audit approach should include, and you're making a presentation on what it does include, and you might want to start off by getting comments from the crowd and writing them down on a flip chart. Well, there's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 points that you want to make sure get made. So what you can do is write in pencil on the flip chart. None of the participants will see it. You'll be able to see it, the 5 points you want people to make. And as someone says something like the point you want to make, you can rephrase it to the way you want to say it. Get them all written down. Write down other points as well. But you make sure that you've got the 5 key points written down. Another thing you could do if you want to stand in front of flip charts and write and sort of do it on the fly, you can have them pre-drawn in pencil. So it looks like you're just writing things down, but in fact you've got it all written out in pencil, and you flip over the page and write out another one, and flip over the page and write out another one. Well, you actually had it all pre-written out in pencil. And you can also save them. If you get a really great overhead you want to use again and again, you save it, tape it up on the wall in the presentation room. Slides, PowerPoint slides, some rules. The first one is colors. And this is a replication of an actual slide used in an actual presentation that someone prepared that I was supposed to use. And of course, you can't see it. And black on blue you can't see, and pale white on pale blue you can't see either. So watch the color scheme and watch the contrast. And of course the classic color scheme going back to the days of overhead projectors and overhead slides was black on white. It gives great contrast, but it certainly glares, and it's very glary. So preference recommended, white letters on blue. You get a neutral background. It doesn't look that glary against the wall that it's being projected up against. You get good contrast and no glare. So white letters on a blue background is recommended. Watch for nauseating colors. The problem with PowerPoint is you can have thousands of different colors. Don't use them. So for instance, something like orange, that looks pretty nauseating. The other thing to remember, 8% of men are colorblind, so could be a significant portion of your audience can't see the colors, and if the colors are trying to make some point, a good proportion of your audience is going to miss it. Red-green colorblind is the most common, so if you are going to use colors, watch red and green. But even look at this slide. We've got white, blue, orange, red, and green, and it's already starting to look a little messy and a little busy. Stick to white letters, blue background. The other thing you got to watch is formats that use up space. And if you're doing a presentation for your firm, very often there's a standard firm format and there's a gigantic firm logo on the top right or left-hand corner of the slide. And what that ends up looking like is this. You have a huge fancy logo taking up all the important space on the slide. Then you have a large title, and then you have your text up, and then you put up your whole script, and now you can't see it. It's too small. The other thing that happens if you put up your whole script is you're going to end up reading it, and it's going to sound like this. Don't put up your whole script. There is no need to write everything you plan to say on an overhead. You can paraphrase. You just sound like you've never heard the material before and you don't know what you're talking about. Plus, the other thing is, well, a number of other problems. First of all, you will just read it if there's too much text. Second thing is the audience will just read it too. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to read ahead. They're not going to be listening to what you're saying. They'll just be reading the rest of the slide. The other thing is, if you read the slide text, it sounds like you've never heard it before, and it makes you look like you're not an expert and you're not an expert presenter. Same thing happens if you turn around and read it from the screen. It's, gee, I've never seen this slide before. Oh, look what's up there. So don't turn around and read from the screen. Don't read all the text. Don't have too much stuff in the text. You should know your material well enough that 2 or 3 words, 4 or 5 words are enough of a prompt to get you to do the presentation. Now, the other thing about slide layout, you can't see, the participants can't see the stuff on the bottom half. So don't do that. You want to try to stick to the top half of the slide. And again, as we can have goofy colors, we can have goofy fonts. We don't want goofy fonts. They're silly. We want a sans serif font. So the first font there, that's Times New Roman in 30 point, by the way. And that's just excessively fussy. So Arial or Universe and all of the 3 fonts there, the Times New Roman, the Arial, and the Universe are all in 30 point. The Arial 30 point is just bigger. And you want it to be big so people can see. So let's go. Arial is my favorite font for doing an overhead in 30 point. And some more rules. 40 point type in the heading. That's 40 point type in the heading. 30 point minimum type on the slide. It forces you to be brief. Now I've got a little 20 point comment like there, but that's for me. That's a cue card for me. You want 4 lines of 4 words or at most 6 lines of 6 words and nothing on the bottom half. And you can see I'm pretty close to 6 by 6. I've got 4 lines, and I think if you exclude my little parenthetical comment there, I've got 5 words. And I've used digits instead of words. I've used the number 4 instead of the word 4, and that again makes it simpler. To keep to 6 by 6, another couple of tricks. Take the word and out and replace it with ampersand. You can almost always delete the word the, just get rid of the word. The slide works, you can talk to it. And of the auditor, something of the auditor becomes auditor's possessive, and 3 words becomes 1. So if you work at it, you can get it down almost all the time. Oh, and another way to do this slide, this is just another presentation way. You have more than one slide, and as you change the slides, more lines keep coming up. And if you really want to be fussy, you can have, I've got the 3rd line there in gray, so you can highlight the line that comes up. You can do that. PowerPoint's free. It's not like you have to keep producing another overhead, another acetate. But be careful you don't do that all the time. Do that when you really have a need to do it. Otherwise, you get it too complicated. Too many fonts, too many colors, too goofy, too many lines. Keep it simple. Have a bunch of copies of your presentation. The more important your presentation, the more copies you want. If you were flying to New York to make a presentation at a big conference, I would certainly have one on my computer, but the computer might get lost or stolen. So I'd have one on a flash drive in my pocket, but I might lose that at customs. So I think, depending on how important it was, I think I might actually email the conference organizer a copy of my presentation well ahead of time. They could get it installed on the computer in the presentation room, and I'm sure it's there. It's not going to be lost. Copyright. If you quote someone, their words are copyrighted, and you should have enough courtesy to give them credit. So-and-so said this. If you want to use a cartoon, if you want to put a Dilbert cartoon in because you think that would improve your presentation, and I wonder sometimes about whether that's a good idea, but anyway, if you want to do it, the person who writes that cartoon makes their living from it. It's theirs. You shouldn't copy it and steal it. There are websites that you can go to. If you want a particular cartoon, you can find it on the web. You pay a relatively small fee, and then you can use the cartoon in your presentation. So respect copyright, respect other people's work, and if they require you to pay them for it, to use it, you need to pay them for it, or don't use it. Goodbye. Now, what just happened to all of you? You all, oh, the presentation's over, I can leave now. Well, no, I didn't actually mean that. If you put up a slide like that, that's what's going to happen. People are going to start gathering up their books and heading out the door. And unless you want them to do that, don't do that. So don't put up such a slide. Instead, having an ending or summary slide, talk to that slide, and then close the presentation. So that was preparing your presentation. Now prepare and learn your subject. It's much easier if the material is yours, and actually 1 and 2 steps will go together if it's your material. If it's not your material, you're going to have to spend time fixing and preparing and learning. Rough budget, 7 hours per presentation hour or more. And rehearse. If you've never done this before, you'd better rehearse. It's easier the more times you've done it. If you just stand and talk to the computer screen, that's one thing. If you're really brave, you can get out your cell phone and videotape yourself. It's kind of horrible to watch yourself. You'll be planning on, you know, I want to keep my arms at my side. I don't want to fiddle with a pencil. I want to look at the participants. I don't want to look at my shoes. And you're going to watch it and go, oh, no. If you don't want to videotape yourself, maybe you get a test audience. You're going to make a presentation at your national office. You might gather together a test audience from your office in your home city. But again, feedback is not fun because you're going to say, how did I do? And they're going to go, well, you did really good, but you needed to keep your arms at your side and you didn't look at the audience and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And you're going to go, But rehearsal, very important. Take the feedback, learn, grow, develop, and you'll do a better job. And then finally make the presentation. Now, some tips while you're doing the presentation. Always start on time. Never start late. There was once that there was a blizzard. It was forecast. I knew about it. I left way early. I got there an hour ahead of time. 80 or 90% of the participants were there by the starting time, and I went, why would I delay? Everybody got here on time, even though there was a blizzard. Always start on time. And don't ever go overtime. You must stop on time. You need a clock. You will need to practice as you do presentations to speed up or slow down. Make sure that your presentation will cover the time not finished too soon and not finished too late. Don't go overtime. And if you're trying to make a point, repeat your points. Say the points again. Emphasize. The other thing you want to do is you want to focus the participants' attention. Now, the longest a human being can reasonably concentrate is like 30 or 40 minutes. And at the end of 30 or 40 minutes, all human beings' attention is straying. So, how does your position and your movement, if you stand behind a podium the entire presentation, are people going to get bored and start drifting? Yeah. I prefer not to stand behind a podium. I prefer to move around in the presentation area. If you watch someone like Tony Robbins stalks from one side of the stage to the other, points at people. What's he doing? He's refocusing their attention, reattracting their attention. He's not doing it by accident. He's doing it on purpose. And I said concentration breaks are needed. Either breaks by having a participant exercise. There's the physical coffee break every hour and a half or so. But Every 20 or 30 minutes, you need to be doing something different. You need to have questions. You need to have a participant exercise. You need to do something. People just can't concentrate for an hour and a half at a time, so break it up for them. If you have handouts at the end and you want to make sure that everybody picks up a copy of your handout because that's an objective of yours, say, I have handouts of my presentation at the back. Gee, I hope I have enough. And when you say that, others go, oh, I better make sure I go get one right away. Now, you'd absolutely better be sure you have enough. You're just getting people to want to make sure that they pick up a copy of your presentation. Room layout. The room layout is always wrong. Always come early. You will have to fix the room layout. You will have to fix and test the equipment. You will have to focus and position the projector unless it's bolted to the ceiling. If it's on a table, you're going to have to prop it up. You're going to have to line it up. You're going to have to move it back and forth. You want to get the image as big as the screen, and you would prefer not to have to walk in front of the screen and have the projector shine in your eyes and make you look silly. So I will sometimes, depending, they typically put the projector and the screen in the middle of the room where you have to walk in front of it. And I will try to find the place that I can stand that I'm not in the way of the projector. Sometimes I'll put a little piece of masking tape on the floor to mark where I have to walk around so I don't get in front of the screen. Keystoning, the top or the bottom is bigger. Like the top is bigger than the bottom or the bottom is bigger than the top. Tilt the screen, tilt the projector. Most projectors have a keystoning control on it so that you can fiddle it till you get the image to be rectangular. Lights in the room, again, I prefer them to be bright. You want the participants to feel like they're part of the presentation, and if the room lights are up, they will. You want to try to find a spot for your flip chart so that you don't have to walk in front of the overhead projector screen, so you want to position that. And you might wish to bring an emergency kit, markers, masking tape, all the things that you think you will need during your presentation that are supposed to be in the room but probably won't be. Room layout. If it's a whole bunch of chairs in rows, it better be short because maybe half an hour, 45 minutes is the longest people can stand sitting like that. More common is lecture style. You have a bunch of tables with chairs behind them. Preferred to that is herringbone, where you tip the table or tilt the tables back so it's in kind of a herringbone fashion. Opens up the room, makes the people at the back of the room feel like they're part of the presentation. Allows the instructor to walk back and forth in front of the participants and talk to people and connect and see if they're understanding what's being said. If you are having a firm presentation and you expect people to do things together, you might want to have them in table groups of 4 or 6 so that you will present for a short period of time and then turn them into your table groups. My favorite, but this takes up a lot of room, is U-shaped, and then everyone is facing the instructor and everyone feels like they're involved, and the instructor can walk back and forth and see whether people are getting it and you can move on, or whether everyone's looking puzzled and you go, I'd better go over that again because they didn't get it. So U-shaped, my favorite. Question period. If at the end you decide you want to say, are there any questions? Here's how I might suggest that you might administer that. You will say, okay, we have some time for questions. Who has the first question? Now, typically what will happen is no one will say anything. So first choice is you have one of your buddies at the back of the room with a written seated question. So they go, hey, John, how do you run the question period? I've often wondered about that. If you don't want to do it that way, you could say yourself, you could say, okay, open for questions. A question I am often asked is, how do you start the question period? So once you've got a question or you've asked your own question, you would move away, repeat the question, say, that's a good question. Now, why do you repeat the question? And why do you go back to your podium or to the middle of the stage? A, it's to get back in position, but B, you have a microphone maybe, the person asking the question doesn't, you've heard the question, no one else has. So you repeat the question so everyone can hear it. And then you say, that's a good question. I'm often asked that question. And why are you doing that? You're giving yourself some time to think up an answer. So you're just kind of talking for a while you're going, I don't know the answer to that question. Instead you say, that's a good question. And then once your time is up, you close and you say, okay, who has the last question? Mary has the last question, answer, and the presentation closes. So 4 steps to presentation skills: plan and develop your presentation, prepare your material, often those 2 steps will go together, rehearse, and as you rehearse, you may redo steps 1 and 2, and then present. And at the end of your presentation, if you're going to do it again, you will probably debrief, because you will probably go, you know what, this module should go in front of that module, and this slide should change, and I should do this, and I should do that. And you will have some ideas for how you can do it better the next time. So, thanks for listening.